I'm not going to get into that at this point, but if need be, we'll let you know.
You talked about the possibility that the president may use his executive authority. He has put that option on the table many times, most recently Friday in the Rose Garden. If the president truly believes that what's happening is an emergency, why would he wait 3 weeks to declare it?
Because it's real simple. As the president has said, as most of us in the administration have said on a number of fronts, the best fix is to be able to do it legislatively. But if Congress, particularly Democrats in Congress, would rather play political games and actually do their jobs and fix the problem, then the president will be forced to take a different path. Again, ideally that doesn't happen, but we'll see what happens.
Legally, it's either an emergency, Sarah, or it's not an emergency. You can't have a half emergency, right?
No,
so which is it?
You're missing the point. It is not just an emergency, it's a crisis at the border, both a national security and a humanitarian crisis. But there's a process in which the president wants to exhaust all options, primarily doing what we feel is the best one, which is a legislative fix. But if Congress doesn't do their job, then the president will be forced to make up for all of their shortcomings.
Sarah, 2 questions, Sarah. You talked about what you're not going to negotiate. I'd like to ask you, is the $5.7 billion request from the president non-negotiable?
Again, I'm not going to negotiate from here. That's the whole point of the conference, is to iron out those details and come back to the president with a deal. At the end of the day, the biggest thing that has to happen is there has to be real and adequate funding for border security, including funding for a wall, and we'll see what the conference comes back with.
That would be a number of possibly less than 5.7.
Again, Major, I'm not going to negotiate with you. That's not my role. My job is to communicate where we are in the process, and right now we're in the process of letting the conference do its job, negotiate a deal, and come back to the president.
Thank you, Sarah. 2 questions. Thank you, Sarah. 2 questions for you, if I may. First, on the government shutdown, the president made several promises to families, particularly those who have been affected by crimes committed by illegal immigrants, that they would have a wall at the end of this government shutdown, at the end of this promise. Can he maintain that promise that there will be, to those families, that there will be a wall on the southern border by the end of his first term?
Again, as you know, the president and his administration have engaged and built roughly 100, or contracted to build roughly 115 miles of the border. This 3-week package that just passed, that Democrats actually voted for, included over $200 million in funding for the wall. And the president's not going to stop until the border is secure, and that includes having a border wall.
Another question for you on Afghanistan. There's talk in Afghanistan by the U.S. envoy of a deal that would basically pull U.S. forces out of the country in exchange for a guarantee from the Taliban that there will be no terrorists who remain in the country. Is that a plan that has the White House's support? Is the president support that sort of plan? And would that be a victory for the United States after almost 17 years of war there?
Our priority is to end the war in Afghanistan and to ensure that there is never a base for terrorism in Afghanistan again. Negotiations are going to continue. For anything specific, I can't get into that right now, but I refer you to the State Department beyond that. Krista.
Sarah, thank you. Just to follow up quickly on your answer to Hallie, you said, I'm not aware of that, when asked if the president had ruled out a pardon for Roger Stone. So does that mean he hasn't ruled out a pardon?
Again, I'm not aware of any conversation even regarding that or a need for it.
Can you guarantee, Sarah, just to follow up, can you guarantee that the president won't pardon Roger Stone?
Again, I'm not going to talk about hypotheticals that are just ridiculous of things I haven't talked about.
Jim, go ahead. Crime to be in discussions with WikiLeaks.
Never thought I would be shutting down one reporter to go to Jim Acosta, but here we are.
Marco Rubio said over the weekend, Sarah, that working with WikiLeaks should be considered a crime. Does the president agree?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part.
Marco Rubio said over the weekend that working with WikiLeaks should be considered a crime. Does the president agree?
Look, I think every single outlet that you all represent looked for and searched for information that WikiLeaks was providing, including reporting on it. So I think there's a responsibility by members of the media. I'm not aware of anybody here ever working with WikiLeaks in any capacity, but I do know that every individual that represents a media organization here looked for that information. Most of you reported on that information, so I think you're just as accountable as anybody else in that process. Jim, go ahead.
If I can jump in. Roger Stone last week, Paul Manafort, Michael Cohen, Michael Flynn. Are you concerned, is the president concerned, that as more and more of his associates, former aides, are brought into this investigation, are indicted, plead guilty in this investigation, that this presidency is in danger?
Not at all. In fact, I think nothing could be further from the truth. The more that this goes on, the more and more we see that none of these things have anything to do with the president. In Roger Stone's case, the charges of that indictment have literally nothing to do with the president and have to do with his communications with Congress. So, in fact, I think the further we get into the process, the more and more we see that this has nothing to do with President Trump.
Follow up on that,
Sure.
just if I may. Can you assure the American people that during these conversations that Roger Stone had with WikiLeaks and individuals who were tied to the dumping of that material, that at no time the president had any interactions with Roger Stone, that nobody close to the president had interactions with Roger Stone who may have told the president what was going on in those conversations? All of this, when it comes to Roger Stone, is a complete surprise to the president. He didn't know about any of this. Is that what you're saying?
What I can tell you is that the president did nothing wrong throughout this process, and the charges of the indictment against Mr. Stone have absolutely nothing to do with the president. Take one last question, Steve.
Yes, Sarah. We're expecting in a few moments that the U.S. government will announce some criminal actions against Huawei, the Chinese telecom company, and we're just about to have this Chinese trade delegation here. Are these two at all linked? Are you taking some sort of carrot and stick approach with China? What's the strategy here?
No, those two things are not linked. They're a totally separate process. The negotiations on the trade front will continue to be ongoing, and I believe on that other question and thing that you mentioned may be coming, I believe they're waiting on me to finish so that they can do that. So with that, I will say good afternoon. We'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.